And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's closest allies. In his secret grand jury testimony, Senator Graham told the jurors, quote, "I have told him more times than we can count that he fell short," unquote.
In a pointed exchange, Representative Zoe Lofgren focuses on a key detail often ignored in debates over election accountability. Many of the most damaging witnesses against President Trump were Republicans. From state officials to close political allies, the testimony reveals a consistent pattern. Trump was repeatedly told his fraud claims were false, yet continued to push them anyway.
There was testimony that she was told something by Mr. Ornato, not that she had personal knowledge. And of course, Mr. Ornato was of very questionable veracity. We had a testimony from a Metropolitan Police Department official about an argument, a big argument that the president was having about going to the Capitol. And in fact, the vehicle was delayed going back to the Capitol while that argument occurred. But having said that, I want to focus on something my colleagues across the aisle seem to want to ignore. The fact that your investigation into President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election was built on testimony from members of the Republican Party. In fact, last week, the New York Times published grand jury transcripts from Georgia that show the same pattern in Trump's Georgia criminal case. Georgia's Republican Attorney General Chris Carr testified that he told, quote, and this is a quote, "We're just not seeing the things that you are seeing." And the late Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, also a Republican, testified that Trump's fake elector scheme was, quote, "the craziest thing I've heard." And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's closest allies. In his secret grand jury testimony, Senator Graham told the jurors, quote, "I have told him more times than we can count that he fell short," unquote. And then he said this, quote, "If you told him Martians came and stole votes, he'd be inclined to believe it." Martians, that's from Senator Graham speaking under oath. So here's my question. Mr. Smith, in your deposition with this committee, you testified, and here's a quote, "Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party." That the president's closest allies are telling him that his claims of election fraud are wrong. And so I'm just wondering, can you explain what you meant in your deposition that it was Republicans who were putting their allegiance to their country ahead of their party?
Yes. There were witnesses who I felt would be very strong witnesses, including, for example, the Secretary of State in Georgia, who told Donald Trump the truth, told him things that he did not want to hear, and put him on notice that what he was saying was false. These were people who knew how the elections were conducted in these states, and I believe that witnesses of that nature, witnesses who are willing to tell the truth, even if it's going to impose a cost on them in their lives, my experience as a prosecutor over 30 years is that witnesses like that are very credible, and that jurors tend to believe witnesses like that because they pay a cost for telling the truth.
In terms of the grand jury testimony that's now been released, the fact that Donald Trump, according to Senator Graham, would believe that Martians stole the election, what does that tell you about Trump's state of mind?
That statement is consistent with what we found in our investigation, in that our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state. On the other hand, when individuals would say things that would allow him to stay in power, no matter how fantastical, he would latch onto those. That pattern, over time, we felt was powerful evidence that he, in fact, knew that the fraud claims he was making were false.
You know, who were some of the Republican witnesses who told you that who told President Trump that his claims of election fraud were false? Can you share that with us?
There were a range of witnesses. They ranged from people on his campaign team who had wanted him to win, were employed to help him win the election. They included state officials, state Republican officials who wanted him to win, voted for him, campaigned for him, asked him and his co-conspirators to provide evidence to support their claims, and invariably they never did. It included officials, advisors, people he worked with in the White House who he relied upon for important decisions and who he trusted in other contexts. We felt we had strong evidence from a variety of sources.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Ms. Chairman, my fellow Californian, you were allowing the witness.
Yeah, it's a
to
good
answer.
question. Isn't that grounds to let him answer?
I've given him 30 seconds extra, the gentlelady 30 seconds extra. If the gentleman can be concise and finish up here quickly, we will allow him to finish.
Yes, sir. And just conclude saying we felt that constituted powerful evidence of the knowing falsity of his statements in furtherance of the fraud.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield back, noting the presence of officers who were severely
You've got
attacked.
nothing to yield back.
This exchange exposes a reality that cuts straight through partisan talking points. The investigation into President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election did not rely on political opponents or ideological critics. It relied heavily on Republicans, people who voted for him, worked for him, campaigned for him, and wanted him to win. That fact alone fundamentally challenges the claim that accountability efforts were driven by party politics rather than evidence. What emerges is a pattern of truth-telling that came at real personal and professional cost. State officials, campaign staff, advisors, and elected Republicans repeatedly informed Trump that his claims of widespread fraud were not supported by facts. They explained how elections were run, why the results were valid, and why the theories being circulated did not hold up. These were not distant observers. They were individuals with direct knowledge and direct access, people who understood the machinery of elections and the legal limits of power. The testimony highlights something deeper than disagreement. It reveals intent. When officials told Trump things he did not want to hear, he dismissed them, ignored them, or avoided them entirely. When others offered claims that allowed him to remain in power, no matter how extreme or detached from reality, he embraced them. That contrast is critical. It shows a leader not searching for the truth, but for justification. Not asking whether fraud occurred, but looking for narratives that kept him in office. The credibility of these witnesses matters precisely because of what they risked by speaking honestly. As Mr. Smith explains, juries tend to trust witnesses who suffer consequences for telling the truth. These Republicans faced backlash, threats, political exile, and reputational damage, yet they testified anyway. Their accounts were consistent across states, roles, and institutions. Again and again, they said the same thing. Evidence was requested. Evidence was never produced, and the claims kept changing. The reference to secret grand jury testimony reinforces this point. Statements made under oath, behind closed doors, without cameras or crowds, paint a stark picture. Even Trump's closest allies acknowledged that his beliefs were detached from reality. That testimony was not crafted for political theater. It was given under legal obligation, where consequences for dishonesty are real. This matters because the rule of law depends on intent as much as action. Knowing whether a leader believed false claims or knowingly spread them determines whether misconduct was reckless confusion or deliberate deception. The evidence described here supports the latter. Trump was informed repeatedly, by people he trusted, that his assertions were false, and he continued anyway. The exchange also serves as a reminder of the stakes of January 6th. The discussion does not happen in a vacuum. It happens with the memory of law enforcement officers who were assaulted while protecting elected officials and the constitutional process. Those events were not spontaneous. They were fueled by months of knowingly false claims amplified from the highest office in the country. At its core, this moment is about responsibility. Democracy cannot survive if loyalty to a person outweighs loyalty to truth, and it cannot function if leaders are allowed to dismiss facts whenever they become inconvenient. The testimony shows that many Republicans chose country over party, even when it cost them dearly. That choice stands in sharp contrast to the behavior being scrutinized. This exchange makes clear that accountability is not about revenge or politics. It is about whether truth still matters, whether facts still constrain power, and whether no one, not even a president, is above the law.